Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our second session. Apologies for the slight delay. This is not yet a scheduled eVTOL operation. We have a little bit of a delay today on our takeoff of this panel. I'm very happy that all of you could make it. I'm welcoming every one of you here. Thank you for finding the time to be with us for this very interesting subject matter. Also, very warm welcome to the participants that join us remotely, so online. I would like to hit the road on our journey to what lessons have we learned from the various eVTOL and IAM demonstrations that took place in European airspace so far, by introducing very briefly my dear panelists, and we are the fullest panel, I understand. We even needed an extra chair up here, so it's been cozy. We will not freeze up here, I think. No. Solène to my right. Welcome, Solène, who is responsible for AAM in Group ADP. Solène is overseeing the strategic and business development of AAM, the specific vertiport development within 4 sites across Paris, and the integration of eVTOL across the aviation airspace. Thank you very much for being with us, Solène. Then, next to Solène, we have Maurizio, who has been appointed the ENAV Italy Chief Operating Officer in 2018, after having served as the ENAV Head of Air Navigation Service Directorate since actually 2011. Internationally, he secures the involvement of ENAV in certain key programs and partnerships, for example, the CESAR deployment. And then we have...
And I survived, huh?
You survived that, yeah? The CESAR deployment. The program. Thank you. Yeah, well managed. Congratulations for that, and for being able to be here today, Maurizio. And then we have Christian. Actually, Christian comes from Volocopter and has been working in drones and AAM topics for more than 15 years, and is currently Volocopter's Head of Global Policy and Regulatory Efforts, previously having held similar roles in other industry players, for example, DJI. Then to my left, Carmela. Welcome again. Carmela is well known in European and Italian aviation as well, with a master's degree in aviation engineering and more than 30 years work experience in almost all the domains that make up a regulator, I understand, in ENAC, so that is the Italian CAA, and Camilla is currently ENAC's Director of Research and Development for New Technologies in Aerospace Department. Camilla, in her current role, is developing a new approach to facilitating aviation in Italy, while avoiding a temptation or a tendency of overregulation. That's a very fine field. I guess we get to this during our discussions. And then from another continent, welcome to our panel, Jale. We know each other from Singapore, a symposium where we have been working together already. Jale is representing Skyports and comes here to also share maybe the perspectives from an overseas operator. He's the Regulatory Affairs Manager at Skyports and overseeing regulatory compliance, safety and operational planning for Skyports infrastructure projects in Asia Pacific. And before that, Jale actually was with the Civil Aviation Authority of Singapore in various roles. Last not least, Juanjo, as you are commonly being called, right? Juan José Sola from Spain, from AESA, with more than 15 years of experience in aviation in both private and public sectors. He's currently the head of the US division in the Spanish CAA, and a member also of the ICAO ARPAS panel, and member of JARUS. And what else do I have here? And you are our EASA US focal point, of course. Yes, so we work very closely. Thanks for being here with us. He will have 2 master's degree in aerospace engineering and in management. And by the way, Juanjo is also an airplane and a US pilot and has an initial training even in the ATCO domain, so ATC, as an ATC controller. Very diverse range of experiences, but with certain commonalities from across Europe, but not limited to Europe. And our topic is on the lessons learned that can be drawn from the various demos that we've had. Because we are so full with 6 people, I had kindly asked every panelist to restrict his opening or her opening pitch to just 1 slide for the sake of time before we go there. This one you will recall from previous sessions. Please interact with us. We will take your questions on a time available basis during our session here, and you can upvote questions of colleagues that you like, and please make use of this. A quick time check, we have 66 minutes remaining, and we head off the road with Solène in the order of our sequence here. Solène, can I please hand over the floor to you?
Sure.
To make your key messages to the
Sure,
public.
thank you very much. So I'm Solène Lebris, head of AAM in Group ADP. So as you can see in the slide here, we have developed a sandbox in one of our aerodrome in Paris. The story actually started in 2019, where we actually sent and launched a call for interest for different partners to cover the entire AAM chain value. Obviously, we're interested in eVTOL manufacturer, OEMs, but also with other partners like infrastructure, operations, airspace integration, and also social acceptability. So we actually selected many different partners in all these categories. And then 2 main phases for this project, for this air experimental site. The first phases was, as you can see, in September 2021, where we actually opened that experimental site. So that was done already, and we had like the FATO, so the takeoff and landing area. We had like the hangar and all the maintenance that could be done, and the taxiway. We're quite proud of that taxiway because there's a sign, because it was VTOL only taxiway, which is became quite famous within the ADP. And then the second phase was last November, where it was actually a very important inauguration. We'll come back to that. Important inauguration in November, where we had pretty much full integrated vertiport, and the first fully integrated vertiport in Europe, where we had obviously the FATO, the stands, but we had also like a building with skyports that we created. And that building we could come and test the passenger journey. So we have done like this entire experimental site to come and test everything. As you can see, the vehicle test, the ground infrastructure integration test, and the airspace integration. And during our inauguration in November, what was also quite a breakthrough was the fact that we integrated a piloted eVTOL within conventional aircraft. So we opened our airspace and we made it work together as a very first step of integration.
There has been a lot going on.
Yeah, there's been a lot going on.
And by the way, I'm thankful for a long time standing invitation to come and see Pontoise and what you have established there. Yeah. It will come very soon, I hope. Thank you very much. Solène, we move on to Italy and to hear from Maurizio maybe some perspectives notably from the Rome airports.
Okay, first of all, I'm representing the rigid world of the ATM, so please be nice with me because, you know, it's quite difficult sometimes. Okay, we started the experience of the vertiport, Pianabella Vertiport, close to the most congested airport of Italy, Fiumicino. So it was a great challenge. And the key message that we had after this experience, first of all, we need a strong cooperation with the ATM and the drone operators and the possible future USSP, which is crucial for the success of any initiative. Then we have to consider also the impact of the normal operation of standard general aviation or commercial aviation with the drones. So it's important to investigate more. And so we need a lot of experience and training, and I can say a lot of new concept to be analyzed. And first of all, one single point that I want to add, we know that the airspace in Europe is not designed for USSP operation and for eVTOL operation. So we try to harmonize the operation close to the airport, what it was very, very challenging because we started to build the house from the roof, more or less. But we got a lot of experience from that trial. But the first thing is that we need to find something which is completely different for the nowadays regulation to permit the eVTOL to work in the proper way. The experience was very interesting, but we discovered a lot of things that we have to improve. First of all, which kind of rules to apply to this kind of flying object, which is completely different from the experience. Anyway, this is the key message for our side, strong coordination, because I analyzed just a little portion of the operational side, and we need a strong cooperation among all the stakeholders. This is our point for the evolution of the operation eVTOL.
Thank you, Maurizio. So obviously, Christian, you have been one of those stakeholders that Maurizio has mentioned. Can you let us know what is your takeaway from the various, not only the one in Rome, but the various demo flights that you have done in European airspace?
I'll do my best at least. And thank you and good afternoon, everyone. So Volocopter, you can say we test every week. Demos, yes, we do something that's more public facing, like we've done in Pontoise, like we've done in Rome. But we test every week because as an OEM, that's part of our test flight program. Some of those test flights, yes, they're not conducted in our home airfield in Germany, but they're conducted towards or in front of a larger public audience. We've done it in Pontoise, we've done it in Rome. We actually did it all the way back in Helsinki as part of one of the CESAR projects, the GOF project, a couple of years ago. So that we do so many flights, that also means we learn all the time. So the message here really needs to be concentrated on what are the key learnings, right? Because obviously there's a lot of things that we learn about flight performance and how we design the aircraft every time we fly. But more on the operational side, for us, it's been really eye-opening on how many different actors, how many different stakeholders there are in the aviation community that we need to engage with to make this happen. Because we've got the existing aviation stakeholders we know, we got vertiport operators, we will have ATM, we will have ANSPs, we will have USSPs, we will have regulators, we will have EASA on top of everything. But in our field, it's just as much about local authorities and local government and regional government who all of a sudden play a role because aviation is new in their vicinities, right? Then obviously, Solène mentioned that we've looked at how do we actually do everything together, and that from an OEM perspective and an operator perspective, it's pretty clear that we learn what are the requirements for vertiports and how is that going to look like for the future, because it's still novel ground here, right? Then we've experienced that when we look at the routes, also not just for the demo and test flights, but when we actually go to market in the next couple of years, there's no two countries or no two cities that are the same. It's different routes that we're looking at. The issues we're facing with different route planning may be the same, but you can say it's a new process we start every time to ensure that we take local settings and local circumstances into account. And just let me check what the last point I had on here, which is obvious. It's needless to say that this is new. EASA has been very forward-looking in terms that we have the certification rules in place, but we now need to figure out how are the operations actually going to take place with with the regulation we have coming from EASA and the national implementation from regulators. And because we are still kind of outside that setting and operating on an exemption and a case-by-case basis, every case is new, and that's going to require a lot of coordination when we see that going forward.
Coordination with multiple yet unknown stakeholders potentially, the novelty, etc. I think this is a nice transition also to your pitch, Camilla, and your perspective as the Italian authority being part of the game, and what you have in mind in order to, to address this.
Okay. Do you? No, my microphone doesn't work.
No, your microphone is AOG.
It's on?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for inviting us in this panel. I would like to present our experience. In principle, innovation is moving fast in all domains in general, but aviation is a very regulated, regulated domain. So digitalization, the electrification, ask to the regulator to have a new rule, a new approach, in order to facilitate the creation of an ecosystem where all actors can work together to enable this new innovative air mobility. In 2021, we published a strategic plan with a relevant business plan and roadmap. This roadmap identify specific tests and demonstrations in order to enable 4 prioritizing applications: air taxi, medical good delivery, and agricultural support, monitoring and inspection. We envision a new approach which would try to create a safe testing called testing such as sandbox, where we can open a direct dialogue with the industry and with the operator in order to test their new products and to envisage the lack, the gap in the present regulation. This dialogue is very important, and in our opinion, has to be open between the national authority, industry, and the EASA. Last but not least, it's very important that the creation of this new service will done in dual scenario. We have to cooperate with all stakeholders, national, local authorities, civil and military stakeholders, and we open a policy of alliance with the territories, and we sign a memorandum of understanding with the territories, cities, regions, in order to collect their needs to make faster the enable this mobility. Last but not least, we think that the investment cost, the business model is very important, because all of these has to be sustainable. And sustainability is not only economic sustainability, but is a sustainability in terms of public acceptance too. So we are working a lot about this aspect.
Thank you, Camilla. So sandbox is a key word here. We will certainly get back to this, what exactly that means, what it is might be good for. Let's travel 12,000 and a bit kilometers to the Southeast Asian region, to Singapore. Jaleh, what's going on in Singapore?
Right. So even though I come from Singapore, but Skyport is actually a global company. We have projects all around the world. including in Paris, which is our key project in Europe, together with ADP, of course, where we work together, designing this vertiport, doing tests together with our partners, our OEMs, our technology partners, and of course, it is designed based on the design specifications drafted by EASA for the vertiports. Of course, we have a prototype in Singapore that we built before, and then we have one in US, and we are building one more, which is going to be operationalized in Dubai in 2026. And we learn a lot from our projects. All of these mainly, they start off as test beds. They allow us to test our technologies and work with our partners. And through all of this, I think what we really realize is we need everyone, all the stakeholders together in the game, whether you are the ANSP, whether you are the regulator, the OEM, the operator. We can't do this alone as a vertiport operator, and neither could any of the partners here do it alone. And we really need everyone to come together and see what are the interface issues that we need to solve. I mean, like just now, Volocopter mentioned that they are doing on a case-by-case basis, but then how do we get to a stage where we are able to operate day-to-day? We get one authorization to do work like an airline for Volocopter, and then us like a vertiport operator. And we need to get these issues solved out very early, which is why we are creating all these test beds so that people can come together. And of course, from this, it helps us to accelerate our understanding of what AAM is, what IAM is all about. Is it the same as traditional aviation? If you look at a vertiport, it probably is very similar to what a heliport is. But when we talk about the operations, the interactions with the ANSPs, the interaction with the aircraft operators, it will be slightly different. The airspace that you're operating at is lower, and that is why we need to start the conversation. And of course, in all the projects that we are seeing, it is very important that the government take a leading role, because that is when the government has a will to push ahead these projects, it often helps to bring together all the other regulatory stakeholders. Because when you want to build a vertiport, you want to operate AAM, it's not just about the aviation authorities. You have your fire rescue, you have your building authorities, you have your people who are more concerned about the social impact, the economic impact, and then everyone has to come in. And for us, dealing with the aviation regulator alone is not enough. And that's where when we go into a market where there's a government authority that's able to rally everyone together with other government agencies, then that really helps us to push ahead with AAM. And I think that we have identified very, very strong markets around the world that are willing to do that. And definitely they are pushing the forefront of the developments for AAM and IAM. So that's generally our learning for Skyports, and I hope that this is something that we can bring forward in Europe as well, which is going to be definitely one of the launch markets in the world.
A lot of commonalities to what we have heard, also experienced in your part of the world. Thank you, Jelle. One question comes to my mind. Maybe you remind me later on, should I forget. How do you identify all the actors that you need to address, and who takes the lead in coordinating? To me, this seems to be crucial, and maybe not very clear. Is equally a question to all of you, of course. But before, let's zoom ourselves back to beautiful Spain, where also lots going on, Juanjo, in your country, and there's a lot of activity also on eVTOL demos and test flights, etc. So I bring up your slide and hand the floor to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Cesar, and thanks to EASA for inviting us. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. I bring four lessons learned, and the first lesson learned is the importance of timing. All of these processes take time, and if we have a look at the whole picture, we can see that there are many stakeholders involved, and there are many aspects to consider as well. And of course, the technology is here, but it has to be properly tested, and we have to ensure that every step taken is in the correct way. The second lesson learned, in terms of operational authorization and in practice, is that we can classify all of these demonstrations into three categories or into three groups. First, VBLOS operation with drones up to 25 kilos with a characteristic dimension less than 3 meters, mainly for surveillance, delivery, or inspection. The second group is air taxis concept. I mean those aircraft, big aircraft with more than 3 meter size and more than 600 kilos, eVTOLs. And there are others like airspace simulators or connectivity test. And of course, there is the possibility of a combination of them. The third lesson learned is, at least in our case, is all of the operational authorization that we have granted were in SAIL 2. So operators had or have no intention on going through a design verification report process, and for this reason, the flight envelopes of this kind of flights, or this kind of tests, were very, very, very conservative. Most of them over a control ground zone, sorry, in a very low altitude, in segregated airspace, VLOS, with high adjacent areas, without population there, and mainly in test centers, mainly. The fourth lesson learned, and I think it's something that all of you have highlighted, is the need for sandboxes. We have realized that the specific category is not suitable enough for air taxis test. And I think we have to find another tool that, let's say, facilitate, that accelerate these kind of trials. We can go on this later. And I think that operators and manufacturers, they want to fly now, and they want to fly as much as possible to test their platforms. And I think a significant number of flight hours are needed to face and to guarantee the certified category. And that's all for the moment.
Thank you. So a recurring theme is this sandbox. That seems to be a topic we need to address in a bit more detail, and what we mean with that sandbox in our context. Before I bring up this slide, please, as a polite reminder to interact and engage with us. Shoot us your questions. You can do that anonymously, of course. You can see what your other audience colleagues have already posted and vote for if you like a question. And we will bring this up and see that we can address that. Probably not all of them, because we will, as always, be running out of time, but at least some. So, sandboxes. It's not full of sand, no? Maybe in Spain, not better. What is it? It's just to be on the same page. What we mean. Often, also, we speak about regulatory sandboxes. Is it really that what we mean? Do we need a regulatory sandbox, or do we need a geographic area that is sufficiently segregated, like a playground where industry can freely test and trial? What is it that we need when we speak about sandboxes? What it is that you have established in your country? Who wants to take that?
I can take
Solène?
that.
Yes,
yeah, definitely.
Please.
Yeah, so as you can see, I mean, you've seen the picture already. So we've established what we call a sandbox. But for us, the regulatory aspect was definitely important, and that's why, like, I think, and to be very honest, I think that's a very good anecdote. Is like we started, and the prototype specifications from EASA were not published at the time we started, so we actually based it to start on the heliport design, and then we had to adapt it to the prototype specification from EASA. And pretty much like in terms of FATO, there were some changes. Obviously, there was a V instead of an H, and that sort of thing that we had to go back and redo. But except from that, I mean, there's definitely a regulatory aspect that I think is very important, and we should use more the sandboxes for that. But what we do really is actually tests in our specific case, we're doing it so that we can then deploy, and our objective for us is Paris 2024, is to deploy bigger scale. So it's literally like you have a test bed, that you have an experimental site where you can come and test everything. So we've got the vertiport, we've got the FATO, we've got the parking stand, you can test pretty much everything in terms of passenger journey, from the check-in to the boarding of the VTOL. You can come and test that entire passenger journey. What are the safety considerations that you take into account? Is it different than in airport? Is it all these questions that you can actually ask. You can also do airspace integration as we have done. So we started by closing the airspace and only having volocopter flying, but sort of like within an enclosed volume, separated from the traffic. And slowly, with the French Civil Aviation Authority, we've moved towards something more open. And then in the last experimentation in November 2022, we had cohabitation between conventional aircraft and the Velocity. So it's also for this airspace integration sort of a test. So we can literally come and test every single aspect before going in a bigger scale in Paris. So for me, that's what is a sandbox. But that's my perspective with our ambition, obviously, and then to recreate what we have done in Pontoise in 5 sites across Paris for 2024. So obviously, these sites are extremely important to come and test every single aspect for that.
So the full thing, full journey as a passenger. A question to our ATM colleague around the table.
Yes, nothing to add more, because this is the idea that is important. I would like just to underline that it is important to test also the procedure and the possible evolution of the regulation. This is important because we know the industry is working, has their playground, more or less. But it's important also to test what will be the future, the possible evolution of the service that we have to apply to this kind of newcomers, let's say to the eVTOL, for instance, to imagine something which is specific done for this kind of segment of the aviation. Because nowadays, as a service providers, it's very complex to manage eVTOL operation in integrated airspace. First of all, because we don't know what kind of service we have to provide. Secondly, because we have to harmonize the different, let's say, level of traffic. Imagine having an eVTOL working around at a congested airport. The service, the ATS, is not able to manage in a proper way this kind of new flying object, because for instance, if he's operating in VFR, he has to have onboard the transponder if the airspace is classified as Charlie or Delta. That is not the case for eVTOL. So that it's important to having a sandbox to explore all the possibility that a connection and adaptation that we have to explore to adapt the new service that we have to deliver to the specific segment of this aviation. So sandbox are crucial for us, but not only on with industrial approach, also to test the procedure and the possible evolution of the legislation, for instance. This is crucial for us. Because we are quite rigid. Our approach is quite rigid, and we have to think in a different way to create a sort of ecosystem where all the stakeholders can test the possible evolution of their procedures.
And when establishing those sandboxes in your various experiences that you have made, have you come across any specific difficulty? I mean, we understand the common notion of a sandbox is a good thing for testing this from A to Z, okay, the whole process. But what's the barrier to establishing a sandbox today? What is missing in order to do that maybe more efficiently and faster to establish a sandbox? I mean, Camilla, maybe this is something for you?
Okay. In our experience, I would like to clarify that our vision of a sandbox is not a test bed. It's more. Is a process that could be result in establish a segregated area where we can test technologies or products or services, and could be a real life environment where a direct dialogue with the authority, not only national but EASA too, cooperation with the national authority, will be open in order to better understand if the actual regulation is a real adequate at the innovative products that are produced by industry in this moment, because innovation is moving fast and regulation has different velocity. So our experience is that we can have technological, like experimental sandboxes, just for experiment for testing new technologies that are already covered by the actual regulation. And we can have the industry and the regulator for learning, for establish a better regulation, could be the necessity, the needs to work with the industry in a real life and safe environment to achieve the challenge of new regulation for some product. For example, eVTOL. I think that we need more tests for eVTOL in order to establish their reserve, the energy reserve requirements, and as said by my colleagues, to establish procedure for rules, for flight rules, because VFR helicopter routes, in our opinion, are not sufficient for these new entries, because these new entries will come into our cities, will come in no aviation scenario. So we have to do more.
No aviation scenario, Camilla? Can you?
Not only aviation scenario, because urban city.
Yes, okay.
Not only.
It goes beyond aviation, yeah?
Okay.
Sorry. Thank you. Yes. So I had asked a question earlier. Let me get back to this. How? I mean, also the stakeholder notion was a common thing. Okay, we need to know we have to deal with different stakeholders. We need to know we have to put them all in the same boat in order to work with them collaboratively. That's all nice and fine if you plan for those demos, okay, as you have done in your various countries. But how did you make sure you're not accidentally forgetting one of those new stakeholders that you might even not be aware of yet? Or maybe it has happened even that you were planning for your demo flights, and all of a sudden during the process or even afterwards, you figured out that, oh, damn, I should have maybe also considered this or that new actor that should have been part of the game. Who wants to take that and share experience, please? Christian, you're smiling.
Yeah, I'm smiling, but maybe I can't think of I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm saying I can't think of a situation where we forgot someone. But I mean, the answer is you do your homework, right? So you know who are the established aviation stakeholders. For me, the real challenge is that not just in demonstrations, but remember that live operations are probably next year in Paris. It's taking aviation as we know it and that set of stakeholders and going beyond that, because we're taking aviation into cities where we don't usually take it. So it's also, there's a lot of, let's say, learning by doing in doing this. So because you can map out who is it that we want included, and sure, we want the vertiport operators or the airport operators, you want the aircraft operator, the airline, you want the manufacturer, you want the ANSP, you want the regulator, but that's kind of where our traditional aviation world ends. So how do you go beyond that? How do you go in to get the environmental authorities? How do you go in to get city authorities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? That's learning by doing. And I honestly also think that that's part of the demo process. That's part of the sandboxing process. That we tried this so far, but I'd almost be surprised if there isn't surprises ahead as we get closer to commercial operations and actual entry into service.
Okay. I like the notion that the picture that you painted. Historically, I used to say people were going to aviation. They were traveling out of their city to the airport to take a flight, right? So now it's the reverse. We are now bringing aviation to the people where they actually live and work, and that we do in very low level aviation as well, in addition. So that may play a role. So also with the new actors that are here. Jaleh, is there anything, because I think in Singapore you made this exercise and you have the various local authorities and who is responsible for this and that, left and right of the river and the pedestrian walkway, etc.
Yeah. So maybe I'll just share experiences from Singapore, because in Singapore we're also working with Volocopter to try and launch commercial AAM services. And we work very closely with the government, whether is it the CAA or there's the Economic Development Board. So these two agencies in Singapore, they are very keen on pushing for AAM and IAM in Singapore, making sure that we can bring the service into the country. And I mean, usually a CAA will look at regulatory aspects, but they are also looking at how they can facilitate our operations. So these two agencies in Singapore, what they try to do is they rally all the other government agencies together, and they talk to us, be it Volocopter, Skyports. We'll see what do we need to address. When you want to build a vertiport, then you realize that you need to talk to people who are managing the parks, because you need to now remove trees for the OLS. And then because we are building our site very near to the coast, you need to talk to people who manage the coastline, and they tell them that you need to do coastal protection. But we are very lucky for the Singapore project, where the government agencies are very supportive and try to have just a single point of contact for us to list out all the issues that we have. And then from there, through this single point of contact, we will then provide our responses and help to address whatever concerns the government may have. And I think that is something that is also very useful if we go to other markets. I mean, in Dubai, now that we are going into Dubai, we are also expecting that there could be, that the government will be helping to facilitate some of these conversations for us. And I think even for Paris, right, working with ADP, working with the city government, it's easier to work through the governments and find the right contacts. They will point us to the right agencies to tell us, okay, you need to talk to this person, you talk to the other person, and that's how we get the project going. And we are not doing this on our own. Yeah.
And that you see as a government role, a government task to point the industry to the right actors. Yeah. Is that also something that you can share, Christian? Because I think the more actors, the more cooks you put around in the kitchen, right? The higher the chance that the meal is completely messed up, and someone needs to coordinate the whole cooking process. So who should that be? Is it the OEM, the operator, or is it maybe a government function? Maybe even a non-aviation actor takes the lead?
I don't think there is an answer yet. And again, I think that's one of the things we're actually learning. You can say what we have in common is we all share the ambition of presenting these products, right? And if it's us from an OEM airline perspective, if it's Solen from the ADP perspective, it's the ANSP perspective, we all have that in common. And to me, the drawing on some experiences from manned aviation, there is in an airport environment, there is something called collaborative decision making. And it's kind of the same here. Mm-hmm. So we are finding out who is it that's actually responsible for this as we go along. But the good thing is that we share the same ambition, and then we'll have to define it along the way. I don't think you can expect government to point you to all stakeholders that needs to be heard. Mm-hmm. But because government itself is various levels and various stakeholders with potentially various opinions.
Juanjo, you mentioned the notion of plan ahead and calculate a good chunk of time before, from receiving a request, from doing some sort of a demo or a sandbox or whatever operation, until you actually have everything in place to conduct it. I would be interested to get an idea of what's the approximate timeline that you experienced, for example, that was appropriate.
Yes, it's difficult to say because, as you can imagine, we have a lot of burden in Spain, and I don't know exactly how this works in other countries, but we have a variety of application and coordination before the operator move the stick and fly, and our operational authorization take some months. To be honest, that depends on if this authorization is the first one that we have faced. Because every single operational authorization for us was a project that consisted in iterative processes with the operator, and of course we learn from each other. Once we have, let's say, approved one different CONOPS like swarming or eVTOLs in VLOS or whatever, for us it takes less time. So I would say that it takes 3-4 months for the first time. I am talking about this complex authorization, of course, but after that, one of these can take from our side 1 month, 2 weeks. But as all of my colleagues mentioned, there are many stakeholders involved. So sometimes time depends not only in our approval, it depends also in the other coordination with the NSP, with the police, with the cities. So I could say some months for the first time, and maybe 1 month for next time with the same CONOPS.
Okay, thank you. Can that be shared? Is this some experience that? I mean, Volocopter is probably amongst those OEMs that has a largest footprint of having performed demo flights, at least from a European context.
Of course, there are experiences you can draw on every time, and you get wiser all the time. But I will say again, every situation is unique. And as Juanjo said in the beginning, that Spain is a unique environment that you cannot directly transfer to France or Italy. It's we're in the fortunate position that we've got regulators also talking to each other and learning from each other. But I'd be careful saying that you can transfer those kind of things.
Okay. That brings me actually to the next question. I was asked yesterday when making a little interview advertising for this panel session. The interviewer asked me, why is it that why do we have to repeat these demos in all kinds of European cities over and again? What's the value of that? So why are we doing that? That's an open question, probably to all of you, like in equal terms. What's the benefit? Is it because you said every city is completely different? Is it because of other factors? Is it to build up operational experience, or a combination of those?
I believe it's also because you have to have the onboarding of for example, for us, the French Civil Aviation Authority. So they are the one who are giving authorization. I mean, obviously the certification is given by EASA, but then after that, on the routes, on the operations, on everything, you need to have their buy-in. And I think it goes back to the question where you had earlier about the challenges. I mean, for us, one of the challenges was obviously to get the right authorization, and I guess it's the same in all the countries. But also that challenge becomes very beneficial, because then once you have the onboarding, for example, for us at the French Civil Aviation Authority, then they are on board on that project, and exactly as you were saying earlier, you learn by doing and you learn by seeing. And actually, when we had the VC2X from Volocopter a few times in Pontoise, you learn by seeing it. And then for the entire French Civil Aviation Authority, it changed a lot to actually see the behavior of the VTOL, see how you can maneuver, see when you're actually crossing the runway, how it works, how it goes, and having all of that in terms of challenges become like an amazing opportunity to have the onboarding. So that's why I think, to respond to your question, I think it has to be done pretty much like probably for onboarding of the French, of the Civil Aviation Authority. That's sort of like an important part.
And provide training to the NAA by repeating the exercise, so
to
say,
them
you
or
could say?
thanks
Okay.
to them, so that they can make some decisions also in terms of like integration into the airspace.
Yeah.
So the idea, like for us, when we opened in November 2022, when we had conventional aircraft and the VC2X from Volocopter, it's like, how do you make them work in the same airspace? How does it work? And then from the French Civil Aviation Authority, it's a question of clearances, it's a question of separation, it's a question of all of that, and
So
you do
then
it
likewise
together.
providing familiarization to the ATM colleagues.
Yeah, okay. That's it. I am also the old guy. Anyway, I think we are to work. I think in this segment, in this period, the ATM is not the solution of the problem, because we are designed to provide a service in certain standards which are completely different from the experience that we are trying to do now. So ATM, there is a question here, just to go straight to the point.
Please go ahead, Mauricio.
About the airports, no?
Yeah, very good.
In my opinion,
Let's just repeat the question so that we are clear which, because it's not seen currently.
yes, his report is to be question number 2.
Number 2, how eVTOL operations should be managed in the neighborhood of an airport, not to disrupt manned aviation. Should it be managed by the ATC tower or independently? That's, I think, exactly what you meant there.
The question, it's very interesting. In my opinion, should be managed independently, because the ATC is providing a certain service which is quite clear. First question, is the eVTOL working as a VFR? Is flying as VFR? It's not the case, I think, because if I apply the rules for the VFR, as I mentioned before, he has to fly 500 feet distant from the higher obstacle in the zone. If the altitude is so high, maybe the power, the endurance, it will be shorter. So
unless being granted an exemption, no?
Yes, okay, but we have to find something different. So the ATS service and is not designed to provide such a kind of service. We have to find something different. So what I see, this is my vision, is not the law, probably. Probably the USSP in a complex ATM, in a complex space, could provide an harmonization between unmanned and manned, because I can see the advanced air mobility, EM, closest to the unmanned world instead of the classic aviation world. So we had to move on a different way. Maybe we could have a specific provider for this segment of aviation, which is completely different from the ATM. And this is something that we could try, we could test in a sandbox. Because, you know, ATM is designed to provide service from aircraft flying at 8 miles per minute on the cruise. And for the approach is about 1/4, it's 3 miles per minute. The speed for the eVTOL, it's, I don't know, 100 kilometers, more or less.
Can depend on roughly between
100 kilometers at the top. It depends on the power. So it's different. So we have to think in a different way, in my opinion. So sandbox could help us to find the right way to give a customized service to this kind of eVTOL. Okay. And this is the challenge not only for the ATM, but for all the stakeholders. And the sandbox could be an option that we have to explore, helping us to find the right way to manage this kind of traffic.
Thank you, Maurizio. So that's an interesting perspective, that the current ATM setup was not designed really to support this, and we may need to find.
That's what we discovered during the experience in Pianabella.
Yeah.
So it's important to say,
there,
okay.
In the first place, the question could be: is there actually any need for some sort of ATM service, at least in the initial phase, when you have a very low traffic density, and you have agreements in place, and you have a transponder that submits your position?
Let's say, at the initial phase, could help to understand better what is the impact. But the evolution in Paviminion should be something different.
Okay. You're looking already a bit
yes, because we know exactly the rules. if I have to manage this kind of traffic as a simple VFR, it's not an evolution of what we are doing now.
But it would certainly be a starting point, no?
For sure, but what will be the next step?
So my question would be, are we tempted potentially to over-engineer from the beginning for something that is right now not yet needed for quite some time to come? If we talk about individual eVTOL operations, kind of a demonstration, you have one aircraft in the airspace volume at any given point in time, and not 15 at the same point, right? So do you have to have things in place already for the future potential case when having 15 in place? Or is it good enough what we have today in order to enable VFR-like operations of one?
If they are VFR operation, maybe they are not able to cover some distances. Because the more you go high,
yes, that's a performance issue. Okay,
yes, that's a performance. So,
but a glider flying VFR may have the same performance issue after all, or a hot air balloon, no?
Okay, that's why we have to discuss about the different vision. So we could have different vision, but we have a playground where to test.
Okay, I get your point. Is this being shared with my neighbors here to the left? Anything you want to add? Any controversial point, Camilla? Normally you have a very clear position, no?
No clear position. We are exercised about these new topics, and I think that the message coming from Maurizio is very important. We have to approach in different way, because if we approach these new entries as a classic helicopter, it's not in use. It's not an innovative air mobility. But I think that if we envisage the possibility to have to provide some services to such new entries into space, we can give the possibility to enable space services in terms of economic sustainability, because at the moment I think that space has a little bit in difficulty, because space enabling, because there is no clear business model for the US market. So the possibility to use the low space for these new entries, for all innovative air services, not only innovative air mobility, but all innovative services managed by new services coming from, for example, space service. In my opinion, in our opinion, this is a common opinion in Italy, but we are not the regulator at the European level. It's just a suggestion. We suggest to exercise, to testing this opportunity, because could be help all the innovative air service market.
Maybe I can add on.
Please, Charlie. Yes, go ahead.
So maybe I can share some views over here. I actually, I agree with Sasha. Like at the start, the volume is going to be very low. I don't think within the first 3 or 4 years, or the next 3 or 4 years, we will see like tens or hundreds of eVTOLs flying in the city. Firstly, your manufacturers must be able to ramp up their operations, their manufacturing. The airspace must be able to take in this kind of volume of operation. So at the start, I don't see us having like tons of operations in the sky. So we should treat the problem step by step. We start simple. It probably at the start is going to be very similar to a helicopter operation. The volume is low. You just have a few aircraft operating maybe every few hours, or a few in 1 hour. And then after that, during this period, these few years at the start working with the ATM, the ANSPs, the regulators. How do we then scale this up, right? When the volume ramps up, are we expecting new models of air traffic management? And that's the conversation that needs to get started. I mean, for aviation, we came a long way. It's a few decades of experience to reach where we are here today. And the low-level airspace is something that is not really being managed as intensive as how traditional airports or like the wider airspace is being managed. So that we need to take this step by step, and I think we have time, but we start with the simple problem first and not try to complicate the larger issues that we need to address in the future that will impede our current discussions. Is how do we even start commercializing, bring the services into the city, and we need to start this very, very simple. And I think just now I want to go back to one of the questions that Sasha asked earlier. Is it why are we doing so many demonstrations around the world? And I think one part that we want to really address is the part on like public acceptance, because we need to let people know that it's really coming, and it's not as scary as it seems. We want to show people that this is not as you don't bring that kind of noise pollution that people will think. You don't bring that kind of disruptions to traffic or to the economy or to your current modes of transport, and that's what we want to bring into the market. Yeah.
I'm actually, Jelly, I'm grateful that you mentioned this, because one thing was on the question how many times do we have to repeat these demos, was to train the stakeholders, the actors, the NAAs, those who are part of this chain, but the citizens are maybe one of the biggest stakeholders in this. So you may also want to train the citizens what it means to bring eVTOLs into their cities, and this may be a motivation in its own to repeat frequently, even at the same places, potentially, those demo operations. No? Please.
Yeah. So I mean, social acceptability is definitely an important part for us. It's very sort of like a basis that we need to work on. I mean, I touched upon that yesterday on my other panel, where I think it was really an important statement that we as an industry are really looking at technology. That's what we're more interested in. I mean, we all love aviation and we love looking at the technology and the aircraft and everything. And sort of like social acceptability is something that is the back of our head, and then we know that we need to think about it, but it sort of like comes second. And I think that is really a mistake. I think we all need to be very well aware of the concerns for social acceptability, and use these demonstrations, use these sandboxes to really sort of like inform a massive, I mean, the biggest audience as possible. So for example, in our case, and with Volocopter, we have done in March 2022, so a year now, a noise measurement campaign. So it was literally having the French Civil Aviation Authority's microphone, but it was also an association, independent association microphones in the ground, and public transport microphone in the ground. So we had like a lot of microphones just there, and the VC2X from Volocopter flying above this microphone, different altitudes, different speeds, and we use actually the audience there to actually ask questions through a questionnaire, and the answers were really sort of positive. I mean, we had like 86% of people happily surprised about the noise. We even, for the story, we haven't like our CEO doing an interview with the media, and the VC2X was literally at the back, 30 meters away, and he could do the entire interview. Not like a helicopter, sort of like, and you can't hear anything. He could do the entire interview without any problem about the noise. And you know, that sort of thing is really engaging the audience and gaining in social acceptability. And EASA has done actually a study in social acceptability back in 2019. The results are really promising. It was like 83% of people interviewed were feeling positive about the introduction of UAM. 71% of people interviewed were ready to use it, which I think is really interesting also to have that in mind. And we have done it again with Volocopter in Paris, in the Paris region. We've done something similar, trying to gain understanding of the public and the social acceptability, and we have similar results. 74% of people are actually feeling positive about UAM. And what is really interesting is that they're feeling positive not because of the fact that it's environmental friendly, but because it's innovative. And that's what's really important. So The second step in this sort of questionnaires and sort of studies is to understand what are the concerns. EASA has done it really well, and then we've done it also in that study. And as you may know, so the first two is safety and security, so it's something that we really need to sort of communicate all together better on that level. Environmental concerns, obviously. And then comes like privacy and noise. And that's why like on these two levels, we definitely need to, as a group, and while we're doing all these demonstrations and the sandbox, use that to have an audience, public, and inform them. Because I think through information, and as we've done it for the noise measurement campaign, through information and through seeing and sort of living it, you understand it much better and you accept it also better in terms of social acceptability. There's another case, and then we talked about that earlier today with the region of California and North Holland. We all understand that medical use cases is really important. So even for us, Paris Airport, we were more about like airport connections to start with, but now we're working with Paris hospitals to work on like medical use cases, because we know in terms of like it's important for the people to know that you can use it for other medical use cases, and then we're working really closely to use eVTOL for these cases as well.
Excellent. Anything you would like to chime in here from the OEM perspective? So obviously, seeing is believing is a strong point, right? Redo it and then.
You stole my phrase, seeing is believing, because essentially the most recent demo campaigns we've done in Paris and Rome, it's really been fascinating being there, because you have audiences who've never seen an eVTOL flight before. And we had this great experience in Paris. We drove a select crowd out on the top of an open double-decker bus, and before the flight started, they were chatting. Half of them didn't turn around when the aircraft took off because they didn't notice. And it's like in Rome, we had hundreds of people out for the vertiport opening and event. And again, all of these people essentially become ambassadors, not necessarily for Volocopter or Aéroport de Paris or Aeroporto di Roma, but for this technology and for eVTOLs in general. So it really is seeing is believing.
So training of stakeholders, familiarization, creating ambassadors is another notion. Interesting. Okay. We've got less than 10 minutes to go, and we've a few questions here which I don't want to miss to address at least some of them. The first one is, I'm not sure from an EASA perspective I'm in a position to answer, but no, it's okay, it's on the screen. I don't read that question even as an EASA representative. Everyone can read it him or herself. Do my panelists wish to comment on, provide an answer to this question? It's a bit on the provocative side.
I'll take a stab, but it's also saying, I'm sure that there are eVTOL manufacturers flying in Asia, Middle East, US, and other countries. But that's not because it's easier to fly there. That's because the manufacturers are there. I mean, I have, to my mind, I can't mention one European eVTOL manufacturer who's deliberately gone to another country or another continent to test. Sure, there might be some limitations in where you are locally, but no one is moving their testing or their production to another continent because of that. And then there are some other structures that decide where are eVTOL manufacturers. That's about funding. It's about the right circumstances and talent and all that kind of stuff. But it's not because of sandboxing opportunities.
Okay. I think that's a clear enough response to that end. Thank you very much, Christian. On the second one, do we need to change the hard law? Here's the 947 regulation to make sandboxes a reality. Do you think we need? I'm putting that question to you.
Yes, if I may.
Please.
And this situation is something that EASA is fully aware of it. That is something that we are working on it in the TEP, as you know, Sasha. And it's something that we are working very close to Natalie, because we have two ideas. One is, of course, we have to change the regulation, not the MC, the regulation, because how it is right now is operator-centric. But we have to think about sandboxes. So one idea is just to grant it or issue a kind of approval, LUC or whatever, for the test center, and then leave them to do their work, their test. And the other idea maybe is doing something similar that is applying in the manned aviation. Maybe applying the Article 71 of Basic Regulation, we can go through a scheme of special condition and permit to fly. Because as I mentioned, the specific category, for instance, doesn't allow people on board. But maybe if we can, let's say, using this special condition and the permit to fly, we can go and we can address all of these things that specific category is not I think is not suitable. So in my opinion, yes, we have to change the hard law, but in parallel, we can do other things. We can modify the MCs or the guidance material to be more flexible with sail-free operations. There are many things to do. So, but to sum up, yes, I think we have to modify the regulation.
Okay. Other views? Camilla, you're nodding. So
I agree with.
Yes?
I agree with Jose. We need flexible measures are not sufficient in this field, because as for the manufacturers, for the certified products as a certified, we have a different, in Part 21, we have different means for the manufacturer to test the innovative products with permit to flight, not completely in compliance with the rule. So we have to create a similar environment, a similar situation for these new innovative air services, because new product needs to be tested. And if not possible for manufacturer or operator that are going to put into service some new product, direct show compliance with SORA or with the actual regulation. So we need to include the approach, regulatory sandbox approach in the hard regulation. We establish in Italy, we public guidelines material, but just a guidance material, not a rule. We need a regulation, but it's not possible at a national level to establish a national rule that over-regulate and that overlap with European rules. So we needed to work together with EASA.
thank you. Point is well taken, and the good news is that we are, as you are aware, we are in the process of collecting topics after now 2 years of in-service experience, if I may say, with Regulation 947. What's working well, what is not yet working good enough as we expected. So we are opening up the book again now after 2 years, looking for improvements, and this could well be one strong point which should be considered in this inventory list of improvement proposals. Thank you. And that ties in quite nicely into the next question as to how a regulator is taking the results of regulatory or sandboxes as such into account during the rulemaking process. That's the way I would read that question. Well, I think exactly that is a very principle of, is a very idea of that. Is further by reiterating, by fine-tuning, by amending and improving the regulations. It's a continuous process. We've always said, from the perspective of EASA and notably so for the use-based regulation, which is not our subject here, but we always said this is the very first shot. It's the very first, not me as Sasha shot, but the very first shot of EASA as a regulator or the Commission to enable the deployment. So the first, it's a starting point, okay? And then we see, but we expect that we very frequently have to open the book again and make improvements, including to the AMC and GM, by the way. So not only the hard law. So this is anticipated. And on the last question, briefly, a typical eVTOL mission for some OEMs would be 140 kilometers at 4,000 to 5,000 feet. Why is using VFR routes integrating ATM not possible? Okay, this is one use case, one of very many. I should maybe at this point remind that the scope of operational envelopes when we speak about eVTOL, when we speak about IAM per se, is super vast. This can be considered one. And if that was to be considered one, maybe that works under the given conditions. No, so maybe there is no need to rethink anything. But we are not only, at least, talking about such a ConOps, correct?
Yes.
So wow, timer is at 0, and that's good news because I'm also very hungry. But I would like to I'd like to sum up, and we have, well, obviously we have scratched our heads before we came up here as to what is maybe one or two of the key takeaway messages that we would like to give you at hand before leaving this room at the end of our session, to which we all could subscribe. Okay, in a way, although there was a good chunk of controversy, which is good and normal, but at least we have identified few bold things that I'd like to share with you very briefly. Statement number 1. Experimental sandboxes are considered important and beneficial to test interactions between all actors of a or any new ecosystem. Statement number 2. It appears often in discussions that we currently have that type certification seems to be the holy grail of the magic. That's what we need, and that's the only thing that we need, and then we can fly happily and peacefully and safely. But while in order to make a type-certified aircraft fly commercially, many other components such as operational rules, pilot licensing, maintenance requirements, infrastructure, etc., just to mention a few, are equally important like a type certificate, and everything has to come together at the same point in time in order to enable a commercial operation. Often in our discussions and in media, when do you get the type certificate? As if this was the only thing that's needed. So statement number 2 is just to alert and raise awareness. Type certification obviously is very important, is not the only important thing that needs to be considered, like when identifying the various stakeholders that we have discussed here. And then statement number 3, it appears to our collective experience, as we had discussed here, that repetitive demonstrations seem to be the right way to identify, test and validate IAM deployment in various and different EU regions or cities, and that it might even serve as to discover and identify stakeholders that we may not have been anticipated in conventional aviation before. So those reflect on those 3 statements. That's what we wanted to give you at hand as a takeaway. I thank you very much for having stayed with us this late during the day. Apologies again for the delayed departure of this session. Again, as mentioned before, I hope there was something in it for every one of you in that 1 hour and a bit, and I'm very thankful for my panelists to having found the time and the energy to join me here. Thank you very much.